Hey, Rube. How are you?
Hey Dave, how's your Friday going?
Yeah, just watching opening day here. Nothing to see.
Yeah, nothing like the Friday afternoon news dump.
Yeah, here we are. Emergency podcast. This is Eagle Eye presented by Nissan. Reuben Frank, Dave Zangaro. The Eagles trade Haason Reddick to the Jets. Rube is in his car. I was able to run home from watching the Phillies game at a buddy's house. Here we are. Let's talk about it. The Eagles trade Haason Reddick for a 2026 third round pick that can become a second round pick if Reddick plays 67.5% of the Jets' defensive snaps and has 10 or more sacks. If not, it's a 2026 third.
Yeah, and that is critical. It's got to be both. He's got to play just over 2/3 of the snaps and get 10 sacks. And look, he's one of only two players that's had 10 sacks each of the last 4 years. So he should get that. He should be over 67.5%, but a lot can happen. And if he's at 68.2% and the last game doesn't mean anything, he's not going to play in that game. But considering everything, considering how long it's been, considering how everyone knew that the Eagles were desperately trying to unload Haason Reddick, I don't know if they could have done any better than a conditional 3 that I think has a very good chance of becoming a 2.
Yeah, I mean, the problem with the compensation is it's 2 years down the line, and that's generally devalued.
Sure.
I don't think this is a great return. I think it's it's the return they could get right now. I think they certainly didn't have any leverage.
Yeah.
They weren't getting better offers, or they would have traded him already. I think it's fair to be a little disappointed by the return on this trade. Haason Reddick, 2-time Pro Bowler, proven commodity, double-digit sacks in the last 4 seasons, but the way this was going, it seemed like, yeah, of course they're going to trade him. Yeah, I don't think the return's very good.
I think the return is as good as I could imagine him getting. I mean, I agree. And the fact that he only had 1 year left on his deal makes it a little better. You're not getting that return for a guy with 4 years left, and having 1 year left makes it harder to trade, harder to get a return. I don't think they could have done better than this. I agree with you that the 2026 draft is, that's way in the future, but I'm not sure they could have done much better. Like, would you rather have a 4th round pick this year, a 3rd round pick next year, or a 2nd round pick the year after? I don't know, but considering
I
everything,
think this is far from being guaranteed as a 2nd round pick, though.
no, I think that's fair. I think it's got a better than 50% chance of becoming a 2.
Well, you have to remember, I mean, he's entering a situation where they have Jermaine Johnson, they have John Franklin Myers. Like, he's kind of taking over for the role that Bryce Huff had in a way, and
Right.
Bryce Huff played 480 snaps last year.
Yeah, no, I agree. Look, I don't think it's ideal. I don't think it's a lock. It's going to become a 2. I think there's a good chance it does become a 2, but no, I wouldn't say a great chance. I mean, he's played 83, 74, and 74% of the snaps, I think, his last 3 years. I'm not sure what he played his last year in Arizona. I could look it up very quickly. 79%. So the last time he didn't play 74% was 2019 when he was a backup and he was still playing outside linebacker for Arizona for Bill Davis. I think there's a better than 50% chance it becomes a 2, but I agree. I don't think it's anything to celebrate. I think there's probably a sense of relief in the NovaCare complex that they got what they got and they're done with it. But it's not a great return, but it's as good as I think they were going to get.
Yeah, and presumably he will get a new deal from the Jets. I would think that has to be their next order of business here. We haven't seen anything yet, but I mean, that's why he wanted out, was he signed a 3-year, $45 million deal that he outplayed pretty quickly. He played 2 years on that, was crazy productive, 27 sacks in the regular season in those 2 years, had a very good postseason a couple of years ago. $15 million per year for that. I mean, he was underpaid. You understand why he was itching to get
Sure.
a new deal.
And
What
just
do
to
you?
put it, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I was saying, just to put those numbers into context, he was, as of now, he was the 23rd highest paid edge rusher in the league based on average annual salary at 15. That put him 23rd in the league. As far as sacks goes, he's fourth in the league over the last 2 years, over the last 4 years. Either way you measure it, he's fourth. So you're talking about a huge inequity. You don't blame him for wanting to be paid more than $15 million per year. It sounds like a lot of money, but for that kind of production, it's not. It's way underpaid. We knew after the first year when he had 16 sacks, his first year here, that something was going to have to give because he wasn't going to play that whole contract at $15 million a year. And that's just the nature of contracts. They go up dramatically as the cap goes up. And this is a contract that clearly, and I think everybody, I think even Howie would agree, it was not enough. But the situation was, you get Bryce Hoff here, you're gambling that he has a year like he had last year, 10 sacks, and he costs a little less, and he's 4 years younger. So a lot goes into it. I think the bottom line is they just traded a really, really, really good player who helped them win a lot of games and had a great postseason. And it's a shame it came to this.
Yeah, it's definitely a gamble. I mean, I think, and it's not just this trade; it's their whole offseason plan.
Yeah.
At the position, I think it's a gamble. And look, if it pays off, they're going to look really smart because they will have traded a player who theoretically might be starting to hit the downturn. They get younger, and they pay 17 mil per season, where we expect the older player Reddick, who's been more productive, to get a deal worth whatever it is, more than that. But it takes the projection of Bryce Huff, who has never played more than 480 snaps in a season. So I think it's definitely a gamble. It's calculated, right? Like they know it's a gamble. They're banking on their calculations being correct. I'm skeptical about it, to be honest with you.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I mean, you know what you're getting with Haason Reddick. I mean, he's got a body of work. He's got a history of consistency. I believe it's 12 sacks, 11 sacks, 16 sacks, 11 sacks. Myles Garrett's the only other guy that's had double digits each of the last 4 years. So yeah, you're trading that to get younger, to get a little cheaper, but you're getting a guy who's had 1 year with 10 sacks, and you're projecting that he's going to be, with increased playing time, he's going to be a 12, 13 sack guy. You're right. It's skeptical is a strong word, but I think it's a fair word. And I think a lot of their moves this offseason kind of fall into that category of guys who are a little cheaper, who've had a smaller, I guess, body of success, but have shown that they can be very good at times. So you're trading a known quantity. Look, Haason Reddick's going to get 10 to 13 sacks next year if he's healthy. He just will. I don't know that Bryce Huff will.
It's always kind of funny, too, because now the Eagles have to root for Reddick to be really good in order to get the trade value boosted. But in doing that, he will make the decision to move on from him look worse.
Yeah, that's a good point. The better he does, the better shot they have of getting a 2, and the worse they look.
In a way, right? Like I think it is tricky. Look, I understand. I understand why they did all this, right? Like you're looking at a player who is going to turn 30 in September, and you want to get younger at the position, and you prioritize, and maybe they don't prioritize, but they figure out a way to keep Josh Sweat. Getting rid of both of them never made sense to me. I know there was talk about that. I thought that would have been really kind of crazy to get rid of 2 proven commodities.
Yeah.
In this offseason, guys who have played really important snaps for you, helped you get to the playoffs, the Super Bowl. So, yeah, I certainly understand bringing Sweat back, but even that is not a long-term deal. That is a 1 year. You got him for 1 more year. So you look at the future of the position in the city. I mean, it's a really important spot, and we don't know what Bryce Huff is going to be. I have a feeling he's going to be pretty good. I trust the advanced numbers on him. I trust what we've seen of him the last couple of years, but you'd never really know. Josh Sweat's here in 1 more year. Brandon Graham's really got 1 year left. in his career. And then Nolan Smith, we don't know. So there are a lot of answers at a really important position.
He's really the wild card in all this. Nolan Smith is. I don't think anybody knows what to expect. I'm not super optimistic. I'm not super bullish on Nolan Smith. It's really disappointing how little he played this year and how little production he had. He was a first-round pick. So you have Sweat for one more year, and I think, we know what he is. He'll get you – I mean, look, the second half of last year I think was kind of an anomaly. I think he'll get you 8 to 10 sacks, 11 sacks. BG will play hard and get you 3 or 4 sacks just on effort. If Huff gets you 8 to 12 sacks, you're okay. But then if you lose Sweat after next year, where are you with Nolan Smith? It's a big year for him coming up. And it's a really intriguing position because there's question marks about everybody pretty much. The one guy that there weren't any question marks about, they just traded.
Yeah, I mean, and it's a short 2-year stint here with the Eagles. And I think Reddick is a very specific edge rusher. He's proven himself to be very valuable in this league and productive. But I think the league has also kind of told you what they think of him.
I think that's the age more than anything. It's just hard to trade guys who are 29.
No, I mean, even before that, I mean, he had to accept a 3-year, $45 million deal with the Eagles, which was, he quickly outplayed for a guy who had back-to-back double-digit sacks in 2 different systems. I thought that was a low price point when the Eagles signed him. I thought that was a steal. And there weren't bigger contracts out there for him.
Yeah, no, that's true. And I have to see what where that put him when he signed it 2 years ago. But yeah, and that's fair. I mean, he's not. I thought his effort against the run was always, you couldn't ask for more, but that's not what he is. I mean, he's an edge rusher, and so maybe we're seeing that position being devalued a little. I don't know. The whole thing kind of surprises me a little. When it was clear that they were trying to unload him. At first, I thought they'd get more than this, and then the longer he was out there, then you're just like, they got to get something. So it'll be interesting to see. I think if you're the Eagles, you got to hope he has like 6.5 sacks with like 2 games left, and they're all disappointed in him, and then he has a big flurry late and gets to 10. I think he'll do well up there. I mean, but look, he's with his 4th team, Arizona, Carolina Eagles, and his 4th team in 5 years. Because he was only in Carolina 1 year. Yeah, it's tough being, you get that reputation as a journeyman or whatever, but he's a good player and they'll miss him. And I think he'll do well with the Jets.
Yeah, certainly was not as productive last year, but
who was?
We can make some excuses, right? Like he had the thumb early in the season, was not productive. Then he went on that stretch. I think he had 11 sacks in 10 games. And then the end of the season came, and Matt Patricia. I think he's still a really productive player.
I do too, and he started to. I mean, he and Sweaty both started to kind of struggle before Matt Patricia, who's still one of the most highly sought after coordinator.
He's available.
He's out there. I think it's just what you're seeing is a bidding war right now for Matt Patricia's services. But yeah, they both started. I mean, look, I just think, and we've talked about this, that everybody on the team went into a slump. The last 6, 7, whatever weeks, everybody. I mean, from Goddard to AJ to DeAndre, I mean, everybody on both sides of the ball, Blankenship, you name it. When an entire team goes bad, it's more than just the player being done. I don't think Haason Reddick is done. What's interesting is, I mean, I think edges can play into their early 30s if they take care of themselves, which he does. The last time the Eagles had anybody with 10 or more sacks in back-to-back seasons was 91 and 92, and 2 guys did it those 2 years. Clyde Simmons had 32, and Reggie White had 29 and a half. So that's the last time anyone had 27 over 2 years. I'm sorry, I think I phrased that wrong. Clyde actually had more in that 2-year span than Reggie. But that just shows you how rare it is to have that kind of production. Trent Cole had, some 3 straight 10-sack seasons. William Fuller had a couple Hugh got hurt every other year. But Haason Reddick's production is, for a short period of time, it's as good as pretty much any edge rusher the Eagles have had other than Reggie and Clyde, and that's pretty good company.
Yeah, and his season in 2022 was, I mean, he legitimately had some Defensive Player of the Year steam. And then they played in the NFC Championship game, and he outplayed the Defensive Player of the Year. His performance in those playoffs before the Super Bowl and the slick field probably doesn't get talked about enough.
Yeah, and I thought he was going to have a huge game in the Super Bowl, like 2.5 more sacks. He was playing at such a high level. He had 3.5 sacks in those first 2 playoff games.
Mm-hmm.
In 22, he really had 19.5 sacks that year when you think about it, including the postseason, which is crazy production. Yeah, he was unstoppable. It's a shame that field. I mean, we've talked about this for 2 years now, or a year and a half, but it's a shame that field was unplayable because it neutralized one of their best players, neutralized a couple of their best players. You know, think Sweat, BG, all those guys had 11 sacks that year or more. So, yeah, big time player, big time talent, and I think he's far from being finished.
I do too. All right, let's take a real quick break. We'll finish it up on the other side with a look at what's left at the position and maybe if they'll go that way in the draft.
You deserve a car that thrills you, a car that puts goosebumps on your goosebumps. At Nissan, we got everything from turbocharged SUVs to 100% electric vehicles that'll make your heart beat faster. Experience the thrill for yourself and shop your local Nissan store at nissanusa.com today.
Celebrity cook Steve Martorano brings his Italian-American cooking back home to Philly. Enjoy Martorano's Prime at Rivers Casino and Steve's famous meatballs with Sunday gravy, prime steaks, and more. Make reservations at Martorano's Prime on Open Table. Rube, I'm thinking back to earlier this week. We were talking to Nick Sirianni about the edge rusher group, and he mentioned Patrick Robinson before mentioning Haason Reddick. Should have been a pretty big clue.
Not Patrick Robinson.
What did I say? Oh, Patrick Johnson. Yeah, he mentioned Patrick Johnson before.
If he mentioned Patrick Robinson before, yeah, then that would be really damning. But yeah, you're right. I pointed that out to you. We both noticed it. That kind of tells you where his mind was at.
Yeah. So not surprising that Reddick gets traded, but yeah, you look at what they have left there. A lot of pressure on Bryce Huff to come in immediately, take on a bigger role in this defense. He will be a starter now. No questions about that. He's going to have to be a starter. He's going to have to play way more than he's ever played in his career, and he's going to have to be productive given those increased snaps, which, you know, after watching Reddick and Sweat kind of struggle playing a ton of snaps last year, I think there's legitimate concern about that. So you have Huff on one side, you have Josh Sweat on the other. Then it gets a little interesting because you have Nolan Smith and Brandon Graham. I mean, Nolan Smith better be the third rusher this year. We expected that last year, and it was Brandon Graham. I mean, if it's not Nolan Smith this year, there's something wrong.
Yeah, you're right. And I mean, he's going to be one of the most, I think, scrutinized players in camp and as the season starts, for where he was drafted and what he did last year. I mean, yeah, he's got to – look, you're not going to give up on him after 2 years if he has another middling year or non-existent year, but you need to see something significant jump. I wanted to ask you, what do you think a ideal number of snaps is for Huff? I think the most he played was 51% on a percentage basis. That was in 21. Total snaps was last year. He played 480, which was 42%. Where would you like to see him?
Yeah, it's tricky because I honestly think the Eagles edge rushers played a little too much.
Yeah, starting that Buffalo game.
Yeah, I mean, they were playing so much, and it was like we were kind of clamoring for more snaps for Nolan Smith because of that. Last year, Reddick played 862, Josh Sweat played 828. He's got to be in the 700s in a full season. We'll see about injury.
700 level?
Yeah, he's got to be in the 700s, right? Like, that's a starter amount of snaps.
That's about 40, 42 per game. It definitely has to be in that range. I think that's fair. I think once you get over well over 700, you're getting in the danger zone. But yeah, I would think that's
I would think around like 70% at least.
yeah, I agree. I think that's a good place for him, and
Like
they're gonna
65 to
rotate.
70%.
Yeah, I agree. And for
Which
him
is a
to
big jump.
It is. It is, and some guys can't handle that. And we've seen players who are really good role players. And he was more than a role player, but he wasn't. I mean, based on playing time, yeah, he was a role player. Production was very good for the playing time, but yeah, we've seen guys who get that extra playing time, that get that bump, that get that contract, and they can't handle it. And he's got to be able to handle it.
Yeah. So you have Sweat on one side, Huff on the other. Nolan Smith, we talked about, is the big question mark. Brandon Graham is the fourth. They'll have more than four. I think the next guys up would be Patrick Johnson. Makes some sense. Zach Bond's going to have a very specific role, I think, as kind of a versatile edge rusher in certain situations. I think he'll be on the team. I think he'll rush the passer. Then you have like Julian Okwara. You have Terrell Lewis trying to make the team. I think one of those guys could play a role. Then there's the draft.
Yeah.
Do you think there's a chance that they could draft one in the first round? It's not a pressing need, but we know they value the position. And it's also not, from all accounts, it's not a particularly great edge rusher class either.
Yeah. I'd be surprised for the reasons you just cited. And I think if you draft one in the first round, it's also kind of a tacit admission that you don't really believe in Nolan Smith, and they might not. And if they take one in the first round, then basically saying we don't believe in Nolan Smith. Yeah, I'd be surprised. I don't think that's the place to take one.
Yeah, and there might be some options.
Think they'll draft one.
Yeah, it's a position they value, though, and that's the one thing about, if you take an offensive tackle in the first round, there's a chance he doesn't play as a rookie. If you take an edge player, he's at least going to be in the rotation. So that's like
well, we thought that last year, and he wasn't.
Well, he was. It was a smaller bit of the rotation, but
5 to 7 snaps a game the first couple months. But I mean, I guess he was in a rotation technically, but a very, very small piece of it. But look, I obviously their philosophy of drafting defensive linemen in the first round has been successful for them. But yeah, I think they need to get away from that this year.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think there's other. I mean, like you said, it's not a particularly strong group. I think it would be drafting for need a little much.
Well, I don't think it's like a glaring need.
No, we just spent 20 minutes talking about how precarious that position is.
Yeah, it's precarious, but it's not like, like cornerback need, linebacker need, tight end too need.
Yeah, but I mean, there's no known quantities other than Josh Sweat, whose deal is up after this year. So it's kind of a need. One guy who didn't play as a first round pick as a rookie, one guy who's had one good season, and a guy who's 36 who's retiring after this year. So
then why wouldn't, if it's a need, then why wouldn't you entertain drafting one?
I just think it might be a reach. I'm not sure there's somebody, at least at 22.
I mean, we'll see where Jared Verse goes. If that's your cup of tea, Leatu Latu from UCLA would make some sense. Chop Robinson from Penn State. I think there are players who might line up at 22 who make some sense.
Chop Robinson is one that might make sense there.
I think Latu makes sense too.
I think there's guys there. I don't know. I just feel like it's time to do something else. It's like they just keep taking these D linemen. Like their last 3 first-round picks were D linemen. They make it 4 in a row. I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong. I think there's other ways to go. I think there's other ways to go. But it would surprise me because, look, if you predict that they're going to take a defensive lineman in the first round, you're most likely going to be right if you do it every year. I mean, you're just –
yeah, I agree with that. It's a safe bet over time.
Yeah.
All right. You got any other thoughts on this Reddick trade?
Yeah, I mean, I really liked the guy. He was a lot of fun to be around. I'll miss him. He's Haddon Heights High School. What are they? The Garnett? What's their nickname? Garnett, I believe.
Is it Garnett, like Kevin Garnett, or the Garnets?
Garnets, but yeah, Garnets, yeah. But Temple, Philly guy. It was always fun talking to him about South Jersey football. He always kept track of what was going on in the Colonial Conference. He was an honest guy. Like when he was the one defensive guy last year when Patricia came in, who said, "Look, this is really hard. This is really difficult, and I don't know if it's going to work." He was one honest guy in that locker room, and obviously it didn't work. And I just appreciate his honesty. A lot of guys are afraid to say that kind of stuff. I mean, he was really blunt about how difficult it is, how it's a really tough transition, and we got to learn this whole new language. And he said, for some of these guys, they're just learning Sean Desai's system. They weren't here last year, so I appreciate his honesty, and I appreciate his accessibility. There were times where we wouldn't see him for a few weeks, but when he did talk, he was honest, he was blunt, and he didn't pull any punches, and I appreciate that.
Yeah, all the local guys are gone.
Yeah, Swift is gone.
Olamide Zacchaeus is gone. Sean Bradley is a free agent.
Yeah. By the way, I came up with a list, which is incredible. They've now cut ties with, 21 players who started a game last year. Either cut ties, released, traded, or signed elsewhere, or are not currently under contract. I'm just going to go through the names real quick because it's crazy. That's like they had 44 players start at least one game, and almost half of them are gone, which is almost 21. One more, it'll be half, right? 22 will be half of 44. So Swift and Byard signed with the Bears, Stoll with the Giants, Sua with the Bucks, Quez with the Steelers, Nicholas Morrow with the Bills, Driscoll with the Dolphins, Mariota with the Commanders, and Zacchaeus also. And then Fletch, obviously, and Kelsey retired. They released Avante Maddox. And three guys who were with the team early last year and started at least one game were either released or traded during the season: Contavious Street, Christian Ellis, and Terrell Edmonds. And then there's guys who were under contract last year who are not currently with any team: Zach Cunningham, Justin Evans, Julio Jones, Shaq Leonard, and Bradley Roby. So that's a lot of turnover. I can't disagree with it. I mean, there's guys there who you wish were still here, but I spelled Roby wrong in my story, by the way. I don't know if you probably caught that. I spelled it like the old Celtic Reggie Roby. Remember Reggie Roby? I spelled it EY. So now everyone knows. Everyone can go look at it and make fun of me. You're not going to change it, are you? You're going to fix it? Anyway, so that's a lot of turnover. I think they needed it.
Sometimes they'll let you just go like that.
I appreciate that.
Yeah. You got anything else? Let's wrap this up. If you enjoy the Eagle Eye podcast, please do us a favor, rate and subscribe wherever you get your pods. If you're watching on YouTube, click that like button, subscribe there as well. Just a bonus emergency pod. Rube's in a car. I ran home from watching the Phillies game. We just wanted to kind of talk to you guys about the news a little bit. That's it. We'll be back with you next week. This has been Eagle Eye, presented by Nissan. Enjoy your weekends, everyone.